Hello, so welcome everybody to a special live edition of the Playfulife Podcast. We have Matt of Weinstein with us today, and I'm very excited about this episode. And I'll just show you this book here. I don't know. You might pick it up and think like managing to have fun. This book is dense. It's really dense of all sorts of tips and thoughts and inspiration about bringing more playfulness and more fun at work and bringing more humanity to what we do. And I'm really happy to have Matt here, and we're going to bring him up now immediately straight to the stage here. Hello, Matt.
Hey, Anthony.
So I'm actually really happy that you've joined us today. And I've been playing the playfulness pipe for I don't know, like 5 or 6 years since it was defined. It came out to me, this is what I should be doing. And before that, I was working as a professional juggler. And but my big thing has always been facilitating engaging processes. And so playfulness has been with me for a long time now. And I'm just really interested to know because Matt he founded this company, Playfair, quite some time ago now. Should we?
Almost next year is actually our 50th anniversary. 50 years.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
I know.
I had this idea that it was coming up to this because this book, you talk about like 20 years. It's right. It's like 98 or something, and I was making some calculations. Wow, it's amazing. So I'm going to pass it on to you immediately, Matt. So there's lots of talk about play now. It seems to me anyway. Whether it's actually more play in businesses now, I don't know. I will ask you that question as well. But when you started Playfair 50 years ago, why? Why did you? What was it that brought you to want to bring playfulness there? Who else was doing it at that time, and what were your inspirations? And
yeah. Well, I was an actor in children's theater, and I actually enjoyed the rehearsals more than I even enjoyed the performances. Of course, I loved the performances, but we bonded together as a company by playing theater games, by doing all these fun things together. And I really had it in my head, oh, you know what? I can go into the corporate world and help them bond together as teams by having them play together. And hardly anybody was doing it at that time. Now, I did have a mentor who was very, very important to me, a guy named Bernie DeCoven. And Bernie had a place called the Games Preserve, which was a center for the development of adult playfulness. We thought we had a great name there, the Games Preserve, because we're going to preserve games and play. But, unfortunately, nobody ever quite understood exactly what we were up to. People heard adult playfulness and they thought we must be some kind of X-rated summer camp for adults or something. Or then they heard like Games Preserve and they thought, oh, there'll be all kind of wild animals there. But what happened was I found out I was quite skillful at public relations, and I got reporters from the Washington Post and the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Village Voice to come down, and they wrote articles about us, and it really started growing to something, and that's where Playfair emerged from. We started a branch that would work going out into companies, and that's the one we called Playfair. And it's funny the way you stumble on something that works. As you said, it is about bringing out people's humanity, and I wanted to use play as a way in to help people look at themselves and have a kind of personal growth experience, as well as bonding in a team. So one of the first activities that I used to do all the time was called standing ovations. And I would say, look, not everybody has a great day all the time. How many people have been having a tough month recently? And a lot of people would raise their hand. I was like, how many people have been having a tough week? And how many people have been having a tough day today? And there would still be some people. I say, okay, why don't you guys come up on stage? And I would get them in a line, and I would say to the rest of the audience, okay, here's a group of your colleagues who've been really working hard, but things just haven't been falling for them. They've been having a tough day. Let's give these people the most earth-shaking standing ovation. And everybody would jump up and cheer for them, and they would take a bow on stage, and you would see them transform and just become really alive. So then I would say, okay, for the rest of this presentation, at any time, anybody can get to their feet and say, I want a standing ovation. And no matter what we're doing, we will just stop it and give it to you. So it was really fun because you never knew when it was going to happen. And I had to be really in a state of improv. The problem is people really wanted to do it, but they were in their heads and they stopped listening to me because, I want to. And finally, they would jump up at the most inappropriate time, just before the punchline of my joke or in the middle of a story. But, we had to, let's go for it. But anyway, one thing I noticed was because this idea of standing ovations became part of the kind of the culture of the program, I almost always got a standing ovation at the end of the program because it was a way of them giving back. So because I was competing in the corporate world with a lot of famous people who no one ever heard of me, I put out as my first kind of marketing thing, if Matt does not get a standing ovation at the end of his talk, you don't have to pay him anything. So a lot of people were like, oh, what can I lose? Okay. And I started getting work, and it was really fun because it was a way to play between me and the clients. Like, Avis, the car rental company, at one time, they were bought by all the employees. So they were employee-owned company. And the guy from Avis who introduced me said, well, I have a very unusual arrangement with our next speaker. If he doesn't get a standing ovation, I don't have to pay him anything. And he says, and as you know, we're an employee-owned company now. So that means if you give him a standing ovation at the end, it's coming right out of your paycheck. So here's Matt. But of course, he was the first guy to jump up at the end. And there was another great time where I was talking with the person that hired me before going on stage, and he said, Matt, I'm looking forward to getting a free program from you today. And I said, look, don't even say anything like that. You don't want to put that kind of energy into the air that I'm going to bomb. And he said, no. I'm expecting you to do a great program. I'm just expecting not to pay you. And I'm like, I don't understand. They said, well, have you seen the program? And I said, no. And he takes out this, the magazine, and he goes to the place where my program is described. And there's a nice picture of me. There's a description. And at the bottom, it says, due to a childhood trauma, Matt gets terrified if anyone stands up in front of him. So please remain in your seat at the end of his program. And I'm going like, you can't do this. But it turns out he had printed up that thing just to freak me out. Which it did, of course. He didn't really distribute that program to the rest of the people. So, it was time. It was just a way to have an energy going back and forth with me and the audience. And in fact, there was one time I remember where I finished, my big finish, and people were applauding, but nobody was standing up. And I was thinking like, oh no, I'm actually going to have to give the money back. But then the person who hired me came running up on stage, and she said to me, oh, no, you don't understand. She said, I've never seen them this excited before. This is the best they can do. This is their idea of a standing ovation. So she was happy to write the check. So, who knows what'll happen, but things take off like that. And it was really, really fun.
Yeah, I like it. I think that's innovative, no? It's putting yourself out there. It's taking a risk, and
it is taking a risk. Yes. Yeah.
Would you say this is a big quality, something that a big value of Playfair? This thing about taking risks. How do you go about talking about risks?
I agree, but you actually never even know what's going to be a risk and what doesn't. I mean, it might feel like a risk to you, but then it turns out it's just absolutely effortless and fine. Because a lot of us have this voice inside of our head like, oh, I don't think it's going to work. Oh, it didn't work. Oh, you don't even know. I'll tell you, one area that I was very risk averse of myself in my personal life is in finances. And I wouldn't, buy stocks or do anything risky. I gave all my money to like the most surefire thing I could do. This is a guy, he didn't give big returns, but very steady returns year after year. My friend told me about him. His father had worked with this guy. He had been investing in him for 30 years. So you know who this guy was? Bernie Madoff. So we totally lost 100% of our money from doing what we thought was the safest thing in the world. And, you just never can tell. You never can tell. So you just do what feels right, and risky, not risky. If you're coming from a genuine place, even if it doesn't work, you learn from it and you move on to the next thing. That's all you can do. And I happen to be very lucky in that about 2 years after we lost all our money, my wife wrote a huge best-selling book called Women, Food, and God, and we managed to get back on our feet again. But a lot of people were not so lucky. But Madoff in the past, just a cautionary tale that even when you try to play it safe, it's not always safe.
One thing I really enjoyed in your book, and I tried out as well once, was this the idea of paying for the toll road for the car behind you. And we have this in Italy where people perhaps buy a coffee for somebody, they leave a paid coffee. But this thing about the car, there's something very special about it, and it completely changed my day. I'll just describe it a second, and then I want you to.
Yes, go.
So basically, there's there's a toll road that we go. It's like €1.60 or something. So that's what you would pay the person behind you. So you just go up to the toll, and you say, I would like to pay for the person behind you as well. And then the other car comes up, and that they're going to be like speechless, or they're going to start asking themselves, who was that? Who is this mysterious person in this car? So even it feels, and it completely derails the ideas that people have about money, about giving, and the special thing about this, Matt, and I want you to talk about this, and is that in your company, you even give people the money, like you reimburse them the double of the expenses to do this all the time.
We do, and it just electrifies everybody. The person who's taking the toll money, the Playfair person who's driving away, thinking to themselves, oh, I can't wait till the next person finds out I paid for them. And then that person who's like driving, trying to catch up. Do I know this guy? What just happened here? So, instead of just boring every day, listen to the radio, everybody comes alive. Now, the problem nowadays is, we were based in Berkeley, California then, and we did a lot of business into San Francisco. And going across the Bay Bridge is where we used to reimburse everybody. Now it's all automated, though. So they have this, there's not even any toll collectors. You have this fast pass, or they take a picture of your driver's license. So you have to think of other ways to pay it forward now than working on that particular bridge. Yeah.
And what other things like this you have in your culture is to keep the company alive? Like how many people work for Playfair now, and what's it like working for your company?
There's about 30 who are really active. One of the things we do this time of year is first day of school in colleges and universities. We do a giant mixer icebreaker community building event. For a lot of the new students, it's their first time away from home. They were a big fish in high school, but now there's all these other people. And what we do is this thing that calms them down, gives them a sense of bonding, gives them a sense of community. And we've heard so many anecdotal things about someone feels like they made the wrong decision. They came to the wrong school, and the person says, well, you just go to this Playfair thing tonight, and then we can talk about it afterwards. And, they walk out arm in arm with other people because it's so amazing to calm people's fears, see them coming in really concerned and uptight and afraid, and it just opens them up. So right before the start of that series, and I think we did close to 350 of those events in August and September this year. We gather as many of our staff as we can together for a 3 or 4 day retreat. And this time there were 25 of us that came out. And, we always celebrate our milestones. So one of the ones that we do all the time is when you've been 10 years with Playfair, we do a little ritual, an event for you. And because of the pandemic and COVID, we didn't have in-person retreats for those years. So we had a little bit of a backlog. We had 5 people who had reached their 10-year milestone, but we hadn't done the celebration for them. So I spent months and months planning this. We did a silent disco. You know how that works? Where, you pipe the music into people's headphones and there's different channels. And I was on one microphone and Christopher, who's really funny, was on another mic into different, into the different channels. And, we bought glasses that lit up and, bracelets that flashed, and everybody was decked out and all these things because we did it outdoors, walking from one building to the next. So as we walked from the building where we assembled to the first building where we were going to honor the first person, we stopped along the way, and I would go like, okay, everybody on the blue channel, make a bridge, and Chris would go, okay, red channel, dance under the bridge, and then make your own. And so we were doing all fun things on the way, and we had it very scripted, all these very convoluted. So we got to the first one, and T was there, and we were honoring her first. And so everybody was in a semicircle, and she was there, and I had her just talk about what her experience had been in Playfair for the 10 years. And one of the things she said was, I've had a really difficult time recently. My younger brother died and my father-in-law died, and I've been in such a place of grief. And she said, the last few minutes have been the first glimpse of joy that I've had in the last couple of months. And then she talked about being a Playfair, and we gave her a gift, which was a kind of a virtual reality glasses. And she was like, I can't believe, this was on my Amazon gift list. How did you ever find out that I needed this? And of course, we had talked to her husband about what she needed. And that night she told me, she called him and said, you won't believe what they gave me. And he said, oh, no, I know what they gave you. They called me to find out what you needed. She said, they did? So then she's a great dancer. So we had her do a mirror dance with everybody. She was dancing and we were following her. And then this other thing I had heard of but never tried out, where I had her put up her 2 hands and I said, imagine everybody else. Imagine your nose is connected to her hand. So half the people were on her left hand and her right. And so when she would go like this, you would have to go like this. And everybody was on the same channel and she was doing that. It was ecstatic. So then we all danced over to the next place. And just before we got there, we were going to do a ceremony for the next person. Someone stepped on a wasp nest, and the wasp came out and started stinging. Oh, it was a horrible, horrible thing. But, I didn't know what was happening because I had loud music in my ears. I saw people running around, and later someone had filmed it and we listened to the film and people were screaming. It was horrible. So we all ran indoors, and we had a chef who was preparing our meals for the next day. She made these poultices and put it on things. But 3 people were so seriously bit up that we had to send them to the emergency room at the hospital. And so they drove away and everybody was in complete shock. We had gone from ecstasy to agony in the space of a moment. And so someone said, we need to change venue. We were going to go to this building. It was a yurt at the end of the evening and play this game that we always play together called Werewolf. I don't know if you know this game. It's kind of a fantasy game where everybody takes roles. And so we just went there And amazingly enough, JW, who facilitates the game for us, said, "Come on, let's try it." And we played the game, and people were transported into kind of an alternate reality. And kind of in the middle of the game, we got a text from the people at the hospital, and they were going like this. They had gotten their shots or whatever they had gotten to take care of them, and when there was just a huge sigh of relief, and we just played this game together that was so healing to kind of escape into a different place together. And then the next morning when we woke up, they were all there with us. We continued the ritual indoors this time. And what an amazing, amazing experience of the worst kind of team building, but that we got through this and supported each other and took care of each other was transformational for us. People were saying at the end, this was one of the best retreats I've ever been to. Yeah. Yeah. So just being open to whatever is there is all you can ever do. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's in the description for this call, I'd highlighted the fact that you had written in this book about working with doctors and nurses, that you would say afterwards, you will probably say to your patients, you better play and it will speed up your recovery. And then they'll say, I can't play now. When I
wait till I feel better. Yeah.
Yeah. And then you write like, it doesn't work like this.
Yeah. So, you don't play when you feel better. You feel better when you play. So yeah. And you know what? We got to try that on ourselves. And absolutely, that was an amazing healing experience. And, then when we're out on the road, because people go out doing solo Playfair shows, and there's 30 of us in different places. But like this time, someone said, oh, I did this great fun thing tonight. I put people in partners, and I said to one of them, you're ready to break the world record in weightlifting, and your partner is spotting you and cheering you on. And so people were going like, and half the people in the room were just going crazy. And then she had them reverse the roles. The next day, including me, everybody tried it, and it was so much fun. We were taking videos, sending them back and forth to each other. So it's an ongoing process. It's a way of, sharing our new discoveries instantly. That's what's different than 50 years ago. Now we're just really interconnected in a way that, if people have a hard time, they get a lot of support. If people have a new thing that they want everybody to try, we just try it and work it out in real time.
Oh, brilliant. So lots of people talk about like where play has gone because of the Industrial Revolution, for the call for efficiency and to be productive, and the only thing that's important is work. How can we redefine this, Matt, so it just creates a much more healthy society? Because even though I would say you were a pioneer starting off 50 years ago, I really doubt that there's more talk about play now, but I think probably we're more grinding it than ever now. No, people aren't switching off at all.
Yeah. It's constantly something that you have to relearn and reteach. It's not like something that grows. No. Let me say this. I would say that, there are many more practitioners now, and there's more of a receptivity, but it's not a natural thing in companies for, if you see someone having fun, still mostly the knee-jerk response of a manager is there's somebody goofing off. Instead of saying, okay, people need to regenerate themselves. I can't just push people until they break, because in the end run, that's what destroys the company. There are companies and people who, you talked about the book Managing to Have Fun, which is broken down into those 52 little sections, and it says, do one thing a week. You're not turning your job into a circus. Do one little thing that brings appreciation and joy and bonding to people. And in a year, you're going to see things really, really different. It's not like turning off a light switch on, off, and everything changes. It's like a little dimmer switch, little by little by little, and all of a sudden, oh yeah, it feels good. Because this is the one thing that I always say to managers. It's not. Let's just put it this way: it's going to cost you a lot more to recruit and train new people than it is to keep the people that you already have feeling happy, feeling connected. And anybody can match the salary you're paying. The reason they stay with you isn't because they're going to make more money somewhere else. The reason they stay with you is because they feel appreciated, they feel acknowledged, they feel like they're making a contribution that really is connected to the success of the organization. I mean, I really can say that in truth because that's why we have people with Playfair who stay with 10 years, 20 years, and we just celebrated someone who had his 40th anniversary with Playfair this year. You and I were talking earlier. When I audition people for the company, one of the things I say in my head is this somebody I want to hang out with for the next 10 years? Because this is not just a job that I expect them to come and leave. This is a culture that we've created that makes people really want to contribute and participate. And it does me so much good. Like at our retreat, I walk by and I see two people in really, really intense conversation together. And these are two people who didn't even know each other the year before, but they really get that they're part of something special. And that's something that I saw when I hired them, but something that they see in each other too now. People are very, very dedicated to supporting each other in the company. I just got an email yesterday from one of it was very touching. One of the women in the company who's Jewish, she said she was together with one of the men in the company who's Muslim, and she said they were just talking about what was going on in the Middle East and weeping together. And if it can happen on a small scale like that, it gives me hope that it can happen for the planet. Yeah.
So, just wondering, like, because you walk your talk with your company, what you would like other companies to take on board. You innovate and try new things out. What are just a handful of things that you feel has really been important for Playfair? Even that you are a company that still deals with playfulness, so people would expect it, but it's not granted. It's not to be taken for granted by any means. What kind of like a regular company, they say we're not to do with playfulness. I mean, that's just excuses, right? But what are like just a handful of things that they could start to do to turn their company culture around?
Yeah. Well, even if they just do something where people get a chance to appreciate each other or learn more about each other. I'll tell you one really fun little exercise that we did. All 25 of us were in a circle, and people had a pen and paper, and I said, okay, I want you to write down exactly 6 words, one thing about you that nobody else in this circle knows, one true thing about you that nobody in this circle knows. And I just wrote down for myself something about, I can't even do the 6 words, but I've been learning to memorize poems or something like that. So it doesn't have to be a big deal. But one person I know wrote down like, I had the same karate trainer as Elvis or something like that. And there are actually 2 people who were named after characters on a TV show. So it was just great. Then you crumbled them up and we threw them in the middle and you pulled out one that wasn't yours. And you looked around and tried to guess. You read it out and tried to guess at who it was. And so we developed a little routine. So there were actually 3 guesses, and mostly people didn't get it right. But, half the fun was just imagining who it might be. And it was many of them least likely people you would think who were the person who, had driven a race car or jumped out of a plane in a parachute or whatever. So, little things like that can really start connecting people and learning about each other. Even, there's a very famous exercise called the story of your name, where the names of everybody you work with, but do you really know how they got their names or what their names symbolize, which often is some kind of cultural reference. And, it can be your first name or your middle name or even your family name. And it's so interesting to hear. Everybody has a story about where their name came from. And it's just so interesting. I often talk about my middle name, which is Chaim, which means life in Hebrew. But when I was a kid, I just felt really uptight about having a name that was so kind of not American. And, when I got older, I found out that I had been named for a guy named Chaim Kontorovich, who was my father's political mentor and teacher. And I looked him up on Wikipedia, and he wrote books in 3 different languages. And I thought, this is so great to have been named for my father's intellectual hero. And I never even knew it. It's, I'll tell you the other thing that's great about it. It makes my initials MHW, which are, if you flip them upside down, they're exactly the same. And who else can say that their initials are the same upside down and right side up? So, and we worked with a company that I was just thinking about those paper snowballs that I talked about. They had jobs that nobody really liked to do, and jobs like changing the paper in the printer or the ink in the printer or taking the garbage out to the garbage cans. And so at the beginning of every day, they would have a list of things like that, and they would put them inside a balloon, and they would blow up a balloon, and everybody had a pin, and you got to pop a balloon, and inside it was the job that nobody wanted that you would do for the day. But it made it such a fun, random way of doing it that there are so many ways to make the everyday look different. Yeah. My first book was a book of games in I think it was printed in 1986, that book. It was called Playfair, Everybody's Guide to Non-Competitive Play. There are still used copies on Amazon, I think, of that book. And I remember one time I went away to a hot springs. And I knew this place was clothing optional, and I pulled up in front of the registration. I look over to the side, and there's all these naked people running around, flopping around. I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And I was standing outside my car, and one guy came running up to me. He was like, I can't believe it's you. And I'm like, what? And he says, look what we're doing. And he holds up a copy of my Playfair book. And they were all playing Playfair games, but because they were playing them totally naked, I couldn't get beyond that. And I couldn't recognize, oh, these are my own games that they're playing here. So that was such a great lesson about, I don't even know. There's so many million lessons from that. But just, look at what's really happening, not what's going on in your head. That was classic.
Oh, good. That's so good. So good. So I've been juggling a great bit of my portion of my life. I've decided this year to continue teaching. I hold retreats for jugglers, specifically for jugglers, and also retreats for playfulness, bringing people back into the playfulness. But these ones with jugglers, they're very special because jugglers, I know them, I am a juggler, so I know their curiosity. I know the importance of practice, of expression, and all this. But anyway, I found out just a few weeks ago that Seth Godin, marketing guru, you call it marketing guru. Yeah, he has a juggling practice, and he uses this metaphor to teach people marketing messaging, where he says jugglers, they don't catch. They're not into catching. They're into throwing. And after 30 years of juggling, I've never heard it said quite like this, A juggler's into throwing. And this changed how I juggle and how I teach juggling as well now, because it's this clarity with sending things out very you know where they want to go, and you're not about just like grabbing all sorts of things. And Matt, could you tell me your stories, your juggling stories?
Yeah. Well, there was one of the early Playfair facilitators, Karen, was an incredible circus performer, and she used to travel with sickles. And, in front of the audience, she would juggle them while she was talking about games and play. And people in the front row were like, but she was very, very good. Of course, after 9/11, if you had sickles in your luggage, you'd be arrested. So she had to take that part out of her act. But I remember one time being on a beach with her, and she's the person that taught me how to juggle. And I was just really excited about that. And I brought my juggling balls with me everywhere. And of course, I was on planes most of the time, going from one, speaking engagement to another one. So whenever I would have a layover, I would look for an empty gate area where I could, throw my balls and practice. And I was a terrible juggler when I started out. So I would be throwing them up, but all of a sudden a crowd would come because, you're walking through, you see somebody juggling, you feel it's a show, it's a free show. And then as soon as I started dropping them and hitting myself on the head and bouncing all over the place, the crowd would leave. But, I was like, I'm terrible, don't stay. And then I would just start practicing again with my back, and then people would notice me, and there would be another big crowd. So one thing I am not embarrassed to do is juggle in front of people, because they've already seen me at my worst.
Yeah, juggling's a funny one. It for me, it really opened my eyes in infinite possibilities. It's something I didn't think I would ever learn. I learned it. I was like, wow. So I encourage people to.
It's a great teaching device. And Steve Allen Jr., I remember, he used to just give people scarves, and so it was easier to catch, and he would show them the motion like that, which was very sweet. And I used to be good friends in the early days of Playfair with Michael Davis. Did you ever encounter Michael? He was a juggler. And I'll tell you, this doesn't exactly have to do with juggling, but one part of his act that I really loved, he'd be in a club and he'd be doing his juggling, and he'd see somebody, in the second or third row smoking a cigarette. And so Michael would jump off the stage and he would say to that person, "Hey, mind if I bum a smoke off of you?" And the guy, would be really kind of proud, and Michael wants to share his cigarette. And Michael would take the cigarette, stick it in his nose. He would take a puff like that, go like this, and blow it out like that, and then hand the cigarette back to the guy. And the guy would go like, "Oh," and Michael would go, "Oh, now you're concerned about your health," which I thought was such a great, anti-smoking kind of thing that he would do. Really funny, really funny. So even more than his juggling act, I remember that part of his act.
Yeah, sharing messages. What would you say was your biggest message that you're sharing, or you've shared with your work in all these years, Matt?
Well, that play is not just the province of children, that it's really important as adults. And most of us had to relearn to play because, there's like a pyramid. First, everybody's playing, then you get a little older and you're watching people playing, and then it's only the people who are really good that can play, and then it's the people who are the professionals that can play, and we stop from being participants to start being spectators. And that you have to turn that upside down. That's why cooperative play, where there aren't winners and losers, is what I really try to teach, where the joy of play is, in fact, the end goal, not about being better than anybody else or judging yourself. Because, all of us have this part of our mind that just is always comparing. I'm not as good as I'm not. I did it wrong. And what play does is it helps you escape from that part of your mind and really shut it down. So you're just there for the joy and the pleasure of everyday life, not for, oh yeah, I'm on the treadmill and I'm gonna be the top dog on the treadmill or whatever. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. So, well, you've almost said it now, that Matt. So, just wrapping this up now, what advice would you give to somebody who wants to invite more play into their lives? That they said, yeah, I've had enough of that part. I want to shut off for that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the book that I wrote with Luke Barber, who's my main collaborator. It was called "Work Like Your Dog," and it took that metaphor of I saw you had a cat walking around. I bet you could transfer this to your cat as well. Um, um, you know, you always hear people saying, "Oh man, I've been working like a dog, and my boss is working me like a dog." But the question is, you ever take a moment to notice how your dog does spend his day? I mean, it'd be your lucky day if you could be working like your dog, because dogs don't seem to know the difference between work and play. Everything is fun for them and new and fresh, and they're seeing it like it's for the first time. In fact, I do have the digital version. Let me read you, if we're going to talk about this, I'll read you a little part from Work Like Your Dog.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, so nearly all working dogs, whether my family dog or a rescue dog working on the ski slopes, are great models for us to emulate in our own work lives. They approach their work not only with dedication, loyalty, discipline, sensitivity, and love, but also with joy, enthusiasm, happiness, and a willingness to see their workers play. If you want to increase your abilities in this area of study, spend a few hours this week in the company of a dog. The first thing you'll notice is that the dog is constantly living in the present moment. Everything is of interest to her: the sights, the smells, the slightest movement in the world around her. Nothing seems boring, and every interaction with another being brings its own excitement. Anything that can bring her pleasure will bring her pleasure, including the pleasure of your company. Notice how good you feel around her, how you're filled with joy and tenderness and concentrated focus and excitement. Notice how she makes you laugh over and over and over again. That's exactly how other people can feel in your presence as well, once you learn to go out there and work like your dog. So even if you don't have a dog your own, borrow one for the afternoon. It's so fun to be around a dog. Yeah.
That's so brilliant. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Matt. I think we're going to wrap it up here. Is there anything you would like to say? Any further words you'd like to share?
No, you know what? I really appreciate having the chance to go back and forth with a fellow play enthusiast like you. And I think we covered the waterfront. I really appreciated the questions you have and your own wisdom in this area.
Thank you, Matt. So catch you all guys again soon. Thank you, Matt.
All right.
Bye. Ciao.
Ciao.